welcome again to the Bird Science channel. Today we are going to look at the carbon cycle. At the end of the lesson, we expect that you will be able to describe how carbon is cycled in nature. You should be able to outline the importance of the carbon cycle. You should be able to explain the greenhouse effect and global warming. You should be able to state the causes and the damaging effects of global warming. And you should also be able to state ways to reduce and maintain the carbon cycle. What then is the carbon cycle? The carbon cycle, or in our introduction, we are saying that carbon is a very important element found in every living thing. Human beings, plants, and animals on the surface of the earth. Apart from living things, carbon is also found in various food nutrients such as carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and oil in the Earth's atmosphere, which we normally call the carbon dioxide gas. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let us look at an illustration of how the carbon cycle is. You will see that this is the plant. This plant makes use of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which it uses in producing food. At this stage, it takes away carbon dioxide, which contains carbon, from the atmosphere. When it uses the carbon dioxide to produce food through the process known as photosynthesis, there are some other activities that take place. One of those activities is that animals make use of the food produced. By virtue of respiration, the carbon dioxide is released back, which is what we have here as the carbon emissions. Is released back into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. Let us not also forget that plants themselves also use the same food in obtaining energy for use. So they also go through respiration, which eventually also releases carbon back into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. Now, the plant and the animal can also die, and when they die, they are buried. They go through the process of decay and decomposition. So when they decay and decompose, they also directly release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now we should also know that these plants and animals also go through the process of decomposition, they move on to form what is known as fossil fuels. These fossil fuels is what we get fuels from, such as carbon dioxide, such as petrol, kerosene, diesel, and the likes, which are used in powering various machineries in industries, our vehicles that we use, and any other heavy machinery. So when they also use that, they end up releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So if we want to look at the carbon cycle, we can say that it is a cycle that describes the process in which carbon atoms continually travel from the atmosphere to the earth and then back into the atmosphere. We can also describe it as the organic circulation of carbon from the atmosphere into organisms and back again. From the narrative we have seen, from the illustration that we just looked at, we can identify 4 stages of the carbon cycle. These 4 stages are photosynthesis, which forms the basis of the carbon cycle, in which plants use carbon dioxide from the air to make sugars or food. Respiration, the process by which sugar molecules are broken down to release energy. Carbon dioxide and water are released as byproducts. Decomposition, it is the breakdown of substances into simpler molecular substances. It's the breakdown of dead materials into carbon dioxide and water. And then combustion or burning, which is the process of burning a substance such as wood or fossil fuels. Let us now look at the importance of the carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is tied to the availability of oxygen in the atmosphere. Oxygen is used by living organisms for respiration. During photosynthesis, plants take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and use it to make glucose, which is stored carbon. By this, food is made available to all. So with the first and second point, the first point, we want to emphasize that oxygen is obtained during the process of photosynthesis, in which is a component of the carbon cycle. Hence, the oxygen is made available for us to be able to respire. Remember the saying, when the last tree dies, the last man dies. And then secondly, if photosynthesis doesn't take place by the availability of carbon dioxide, then it means there is no going to be production of food, and that will lead to hunger. All of us will not get food to eat and die. Now the third point of the carbon cycle is that, and that is a natural process. It helps to be able to trap heat, so it helps hold the energy it receives from the sun, so it doesn't all escape back into space. Now if it weren't for carbon dioxide, the earth's ocean would be frozen solid. So by virtue of the carbon cycle, we are able to have some form of warmth on the surface of the earth, which makes us to be able to survive. But irrespective of all this, there are some ways by which the carbon cycle is disrupted. What are some of these ways? We talk about indiscriminate cutting down of trees, which is deforestation. Industrialization. Now you see, the population is increasing and we need to build new houses. We need to clear some forested areas to get the land to build houses. We clear those trees to use them in building houses. So by virtue of that, we are cutting down trees. So industrialization due to increase in population is also a way of disrupting the carbon cycle. Then we talk about pollution. Yes, organisms are supposed to die naturally, which will decay and release the carbon back into the atmosphere. But if we as human beings decide to pollute those environments in which living organisms are, these organisms are going to decay. It is not going to be part of the natural process. Hence, there is going to be too much of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere at that point. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so. So we are going to look at the effects of the disruption of the carbon cycle. Now when it comes to the effects of the disruption of the carbon cycle, we can talk about the greenhouse effect or global warming. We talk about the increase in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And then we also talk about the depletion of the ozone layer. So let us now move on to look at what the greenhouse effect is all about with the help of this illustration. First of all, let us identify three major zones. We're talking about the earth, we are talking about the atmosphere which is surrounding the earth, and then we are also talking about the sun here, which brings us light, and then that falls directly on the earth. Now you see, the atmosphere is surrounded, and so there is more or less a boundary around it, and it is within this space that carbon dioxide is found. Apart from carbon dioxide, which is found within this space, we have some other gases which we refer to as the greenhouse gases. And what do? They are able to trap heat, therefore keeping the earth warm. Now when the sun's rays hit the surface of the earth, some are reflected back into space, and then the rest are trapped to give us that heat. Now the phenomenon of these greenhouse gases, including the carbon dioxide gas, is to trap heat. And for that matter, the more of the carbon dioxide we have, the more heat that is going to be trapped. And that is the concern we are having now. We are not saying that the presence of carbon dioxide is a bad thing. However, too much of that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere leads to the negativity that we are experiencing. And therefore, let us now look at what the greenhouse effect is. The greenhouse effect is the natural warming of the earth that results when gases in the atmosphere trap heat from the sun that would otherwise escape into space. The main gases responsible for the greenhouse effect include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor, which all occur naturally. And then we also have the fluorinated gases, which we refer to as the chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, which are synthetic. Now the CFCs are basically found in the old type of freezers and fridges. So when those devices get old and are not properly disposed, these gases make their way into the atmosphere where they go destroying the ozone layer. From the science channel must be subscribed to if not yet done. So now let's look at what global warming is. Global warming is a phenomenon of climate change characterized by a general increase in average temperatures of the earth, which modifies the weather balances and ecosystems for a long time. It is directly linked to the increase of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, worsening the greenhouse effect. So, in a nutshell, the more greenhouse gases that are trapped, it is going to lead to more warmth being trapped, which becomes a negative thing to us. So we said it is a phenomenon of climate change characterized by a general increase in average temperatures of the earth, which modifies the weather balances. And by virtue of the increase in our weather, it brings about some various changes in our climate and a lot of things that we'll be looking at. So now let us look at the causes of global warming. First of all, we are talking about bush fires. Now, when we have indiscriminate burning of bush, it will, which is caused by the cutting down of trees and vegetation, it releases high amount of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. We are talking about industrialization. Industrialization brings about or caused by the burning of coal and oil, and it results in the production of high amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So you could see in one of the pictures or the diagrams illustrations that we did where we have industries there, so they burn most of this coal. We're talking about deforestation. As said earlier, we cut down the trees to build houses, to produce furniture and the likes. So it also reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Then the use of chlorofluorocarbons also destroy the ozone layer. This damaging effects of global warming: increase in the incidence of bushfires, rise in sea level, which leads to flooding of low-lying and coastal areas, reduction in atmospheric humidity and soil moisture, leading to poor and low agricultural production, melting of icebergs, increase in the atmospheric temperature, So increase in atmospheric temperature is one of those damaging effects of the global warming. Now, what are the ways to reduce global warming? We are talking about afforestation, where we plant more trees to absorb carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We are also talking about encouraging the use of natural gases and liquefied petroleum gas. The use of substitute coolants for the chlorofluorocarbons such as HFCs should also be encouraged. So we need to use hydrofluorocarbons to be able to overcome the effects of the chlorofluorocarbons, which cause damage to the ozone layer. Now, ways of maintaining the carbon cycle: we talk about reforestation, or we engage in afforestation, use of renewable sources of energy other than fossil fuels, planting of cover plants on bare lands, avoid indiscriminate cutting down of trees, prevent the environment from being polluted. Let's not forget to subscribe to the channel, the Great Science channel. So, in conclusion, I believe you'll be able to describe how carbon is cycled in nature. You'll be able to outline the importance of the carbon cycle. You should be able to explain the greenhouse effect and what we mean by global warming. State the causes and damaging effects of global warming, and then also state ways to reduce and maintain the carbon cycle as we have learned. Have a fruitful day. All the best.